Auction clearance rates surge in the first selling weekend of the year, but house prices aren't expected to rise anytime soon. The competition watchdog wants to crack down on social media influencers who spruik products and don't tell their followers that they're getting paid to do so. And the number of ATMs halve as people desert cash. It's Monday, the 30th of January, 2023. Welcome to Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael. Good weekend.
Yeah, it was actually. It was a very summery weekend, isn't it? Like it's the weekend before kind of kids head back to school and everything, and it's just, well, where I am at least, it's been hot.
Yes, I'm the same. We both live in Sydney, so it's been very, very hot. And cranky kids because none of them want to go back to school. I've got to say though, 6 of the 8 in my household have finished school now. So we had 2, Jackie and I had 2 finished last year. So that means ironing lunches for 2, not 4. Oh, glorious, Michael. You've only got about 20 years of that in front of you.
Yes, and how many of those, the 6 out of the 8, are still there living with you?
Yeah, no, all 6.
Yeah,
handy.
Yeah. So you're not entirely out of the woods just yet.
No, not yet.
Now, Sean, we've got an interview coming up after the show today. It's a little bit different, this one. It's a really interesting topic. You're speaking to Liz Ritchie, the CEO of the Regional Australia Institute. This is something that I think you and I are both reasonably passionate about because obviously you grew up in the central western part of New South Wales. I grew up in the kind of riverina part of New South Wales and then the north coast. So we both kind of love regional areas of this country.
Yeah, and Liz, as the boss of that organisation, really is an advocate for rural and regional Australia. And there's no doubt that the cities get the best rub of the green, I suppose. That's because there are more people there. But it's really, really important that we do look after rural and regional Australia. So we talked to Liz about how that can be done. It's just an interesting chat.
Yeah, it's a really interesting chat. It's coming up a little bit later on, but the main story this morning, Sean, it's a big week for the property market with auctions really coming back over the weekend, and figures in a couple of days are likely to show another 1% fall in house prices across capital cities.
Yes, but at least over the weekend, auction clearance rates were surprisingly strong. There were 700 auctions across the country. That's triple the number of the previous week, though still below full speed, obviously. The preliminary clearance rate across the capital cities was 68%, which is well above the December quarter level of 58%. In Melbourne and Sydney, it was particularly strong at 71% and 72% respectively. According to CoreLogic, the downturn has been going on for a year in Sydney and Melbourne and more than 6 months in other capital cities. That's given vendors time to readjust their price expectations, which in turn has boosted the clearance rate.
All right, so those sellers are being more realistic, but that doesn't mean that house prices are about to turn around.
That's right. Plenty of market watchers still think there's another 5 to 10% fall in house prices to go. In fact, figures due for release on Wednesday from CoreLogic are likely to show a 1% drop across capital cities, and they'll probably show the median property price in Sydney has fallen back below $1 million. The median price in December in Sydney was $1.009 million, so it doesn't have to go too far back for it to fall below that mark. In November, Canberra's median house price fell below that $1 million mark. The next few weeks, Michael, will really tell the story. There are more than 1,300 auctions expected to be held over the next week or so across the capital cities. It will be very interesting to see how they go. No one is actually saying that we're going to see a turnaround in house prices. Some are hoping it'll flatten out. For the next few months, people will be rolling off those fixed rate loans. We're likely to come to the end of the interest rate cycle, though there's probably another rate hike or 2 left in the system. So it'll be interesting 6 months or so.
Yeah, certainly will be. All right. What's been happening on the local share market?
Well, on Friday, takeover target Origin Energy grabbed plenty of the attention, upping its earnings guidance for this financial year, even though LNG output in Queensland will be lower due to rain. Now, this is a group that's under due diligence by suitors Brookfield and EIG. That consortium has been looking at Brookfield's books for quite a while. It seems to be going on forever. We still don't really know whether or not they're going to make an offer. Overall, the S&P ASX 200 finished Friday up 0.3% to 7,494 points. Trading was pretty muted, really, with many people enjoying a very long weekend after Australia Day. The banks were strong. ANZ and Macquarie Group were both up more than 1%. Miners were mixed, while the retailers did pretty well. Coal prices have come off quite a bit, and so too have some of the coal companies. In fact, on Friday, New Hope was the worst performer of the top 200, closing down 9%. Whitehaven was up 6.6%. Don't feel too bad for those shareholders because those companies went up about 200% last year. And Michael, the local market is expected to open stronger today after a good weekend on Wall Street, where tech stocks did particularly well.
All right, so a pretty good weekend on Wall Street. What else is happening in international markets?
Earnings season continues on Wall Street. Nearly 30% of S&P 500 companies have now reported December quarter figures. 70% of results have come in better than expected. Now, that sounds like a lot, but normally it's about 76%, so it isn't such a good season. Consensus earnings expectations are for earnings to go backwards by about 2.5% on a year ago. At the moment, they're going up at about 2.5%, so it's likely to end the season around flat. Energy and industrials are coming in the strongest, but materials, telcos and tech companies have generally disappointed. Now, Michael, the Aussie dollar hit its highest level since June 2022 on Friday, touching 71.42 US cents. That's because investors think the Reserve Bank will lift interest rates when it meets a week tomorrow. It enters the new week worth about 71 US cents. Oil prices were off over the weekend. Gold was a touch lower. And gas prices in Europe and the UK, which we spoke about non-stop last year, remember the energy crisis as a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine? Well, those prices have come right back to September 2021 levels. That's months before the invasion. They're still historically high, but they're now about 15% of their peak in August last year. Quite an incredible comeback.
That is extraordinary. All right, we'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, the consumer watchdog has announced a crackdown on social media influencers across platforms including TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Snapchat, Twitch and Instagram. More than 100 accounts are expected to be investigated regarding false testimonials and endorsements after tip-offs from the public.
Yes, the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission said there's been more than 150 tip-offs from consumers. The action follows similar investigations in the US. Remember the $1.7 million fine Kim Kardashian got from the Securities and Exchange Commission? She was promoting a crypto token without disclosing she was paid for it. Well, that's what the ACCC is talking about. Accounts under investigation in Australia offer beauty, lifestyle, parenting and fashion advice. And according to the watchdog, they potentially don't disclose sponsorships or affiliations with particular companies and brands. Boss Gina Cass-Gottlieb said the ACCC will act when it sees consumers are at risk of being misled or deceived by a testimonial, and there is potential for significant harm. I've got to say on this one, Michael, I watch my household kind of make decisions on purchasing products, and it is amazing how influenced they are by social media.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what it kind of reminds me of as well, Sean, is what radio went through probably just a touch over 2 decades ago now with the Cash for Comment saga.
Exactly,
and having kind of worked in radio for some time, I know how seriously radio stations take their obligations there in terms of disclosing that commercials are commercials. And so it feels like now social media is just catching up with kind of where the rest of the media, the mainstream media, has been now for the last kind of 20 years.
Absolutely. And if these influencers are making recommendations and being paid to make that recommendation, they absolutely should disclose that.
Absolutely. Completely agree with you there. All right, Sean, Virgin Australia has won its appeal against a Fair Work Commission ruling that the airline unfairly dismissed a flight attendant who slept and watched a movie on the job and came to work without makeup.
Yes. Now, you know when you're on a flight and you look at the attendants and you're always a little bit, I'm pretty impressed by them, the fact that they continue to work, particularly through these long-haul flights. Anyway, this is kind of what grabbed me about this. The original decision ordered the reinstatement of a woman called Davanya Blackburn after she took legal action claiming she'd been denied procedural fairness when she was dismissed back in mid-2021. Now, evidence was provided that Ms. Blackburn had repeatedly breached Virgin Australia's code of conduct. She had stole snacks from a flight. She'd watched a movie and napped while on duty. She was late and presented for work without makeup. But in that ruling, Commissioner Paula Spencer said her dismissal was harsh, unjust, and unreasonable, and alternative performance management was warranted. However, according to the Australian, the order was stayed ahead of an appeal lodged by the airline with the full bench of the Fair Work Committee. They overturned, perhaps not surprisingly, that original decision.
And just quickly, Sean, while we're on the subject of airlines, one of my favourite subjects, Qantas has released its top watched shows and movies in flight last year. Now, this has kind of pub trivia question written all over it, doesn't it?
It sure does. I mean, everyone uses in-flight entertainment, I think.
Yeah.
So the top movie last year on Qantas was, very appropriate, this one, Top Gun Maverick. In fact, that was viewed more than 750,000 times. That's not bad that it only came out in September last year, yet got viewed more than any other film. The other most popular movies were Elvis and Falling for Figaro. Have you seen either? I've seen Elvis. I haven't seen Falling for Figaro.
No, and I haven't seen Top Gun Maverick either. I don't know whether I could watch a movie about planes on a plane, particularly if any planes get shot down or anything like that in the film. I'm just a little bit apprehensive about that.
Fair enough. So in terms of TV shows, one of your favourites came in at number 1, Succession.
Oh.
Which is sort of interesting given it's not a mainstream show. Number 2 was Sex and the City revival. The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills was also popular.
Really? It was with you, I'm assuming?
Well, yeah, I've never seen it, but I will next time I'm on a flight, be looking straight.
I like it. Just quickly trying to smother. No, I've never seen it. Not very familiar with that.
Now, the top album on board, and I've got to say, I never listen to music on a flight. But the top album on board, and excuse me if I get the name incorrect, 417 HZ, so presumably hertz, 417 hertz Mindfulness by Miracle Tones and Solfeggio Healing Frequencies MT. Anyway, it's a meditation album. It topped the in-flight audio charts with 1.7 million hours listened to over the year. Adele's 30 took out top spot as the most listened to pop album. So there you go.
They are really the two extremes, aren't they? That you've got Top Gun Maverick as the most watched movie, which is like a high-octane action film, and then the top album was a meditation track. Yeah, I'm sure there's something that we could read into that, but I'm not going to right now. We're going to talk about Fortescue Metals instead, Sean. Which is obviously the number 2 iron ore miner in the country, said it shipped 96.9 million tonnes of iron ore in the second half of last year. That is a record volume.
Yeah, and at a time when the global economy was slowing, Fortescue is now shipping about 17% more than it was before the pandemic, and the mine is now likely to reach the top end of the range for its goal for production this financial year. It's now had 5 half years in a row of record production. One interesting bit from the production report on Friday was the cost of building a new mine. Now, a little lesson first. Iron ore is actually a generic term. It includes rocks and minerals from which metallic iron can be extracted. Now, there are 2 main types of iron ore in Australia. Magnetite is one, the other is hematite. Now, Fortescue is building a magnetite project at Iron Bridge in the Pilbara in Western Australia. Construction of it will cost $5.3 billion. They're enormous.
That is a huge amount of money.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, the project isn't coming to fruition quite as quickly as Fortescue would like, and there has been some cost blowout. But $5.3 billion to build something, that's a lot of money.
Yes. Oh, that is huge. I'm learning things from you today, Sean.
There you go.
Another company, Sean, providing an upbeat report last week was sleep disorder and breathing devices company ResMed.
Yes, this is one of my favourite companies. Now, I'll tell you why in a moment, but a pick up in ResMed's supply chain and struggling challenges. Its main competitor in the US has sort of been off the market for about 18 months. That helped the group boost revenue by 10% in the second half of last year to $2.8 billion. Net income rose to around $620 million. Now, ResMed is an Australian company, but it's San Diego based, and it's listed both here on the ASX and on the New York Stock Exchange. I love its boss's name. His name is Mick Farrell, which honestly has to be among the most Aussie of names, and probably Irish actually, but Irish. Mick Farrell from San Diego.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Relevant, but still. Now, Mick Farrell will remain a CEO, and he'll also shift to become chair of the company, they announced on Friday, and he's taking over from his father, Peter Farrell, who's been involved in the company for 35 years. In fact, Peter Farrell was one of the very first investors in sleep apnea technology That technology had been developed at the University of Sydney. Peter Farrell kind of commercialised it, and ResMed has become this incredibly exciting and successful company. That's why I really like the company, and just the fact that the boss is called Mick Farrell.
It's a very good point, and it's actually worth making the point as well, Sean, that we are not an investment podcast, and you should certainly seek professional advice before making any investment decisions. And finally, Sean, if you are struggling to find an ATM, you are certainly not alone, with the number of machines halving between 2017 and June 2022.
Yes, so the number of automated teller machines has gone from nearly 14,000 to less than 6,500. The number of bank branches across the country in that period went from about 5,700 to about 4,000. As the Reserve Bank boss Phil Lowe said late last year, the pandemic accelerated the decline in cash, and some retailers now no longer accept cash. According to the Sydney Morning Herald, Australia's first ATM was installed in Brisbane in 1977 by the Queensland Teachers Credit Union. They were widely introduced in the 1980s. In fact, the number of cash machines jumped after changes in 2009 allowed other companies to charge directly for ATM usage. So suddenly all those $2 fees got introduced. And the number of machines peaked in 2015 at more than 30,000. We're now down to 6,500. That's actually only in 8 years. That's pretty incredible.
That is a really quick drop. All right, moving on to overseas news. And Donald Trump says he is more committed than ever to retake the US presidency, adding that he's angry at the criticism levelled at him.
Trump's 2024 bid suffered a rocky start. People panned his initial speech when he announced his third presidential run in November, called his campaign launch lackluster. Also, there are plenty of media reports at the moment in the US saying the Republican National Committee, which was meeting over the weekend, has gone cold on Trump, citing his age, temperament, and ability to win. Now, Republican strategists say the former president maintained support among hardcore backers that gave him primary wins in a bunch of key states, places like New Hampshire and South Carolina. But, according to Bloomberg, there are signs voters that may now prefer alternatives. The one that's standing up at the moment is Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. He's widely expected to enter the presidency race, and what tipsters are saying at the moment is it will be DeSantis v. Trump for that nomination.
Beijing announced over the weekend, Sean, that students will be forbidden to study online from China at foreign universities, and they must return to their overseas campuses.
Yes, the Ministry of Education statement said that from the first semester this year, the special COVID rule allowing international students to remain in China while studying remotely at foreign universities was being withdrawn, according to the Australian. The ministry said that from now on, remote study for an overseas university degree would not be accredited by China. Obviously, that decision is going to affect tens of thousands of Chinese students at Australian universities who are still studying online from China. Now, Australia's higher education regulator last year gave a July 2023 deadline for international students to end cross-border online study and return to Australia, but it looks like we're going to get a rush of people in the next few weeks.
And finally, Sean, 4 people have died in Auckland after the city was hit by a summer's worth of rain in just 24 hours over the weekend.
Yes, it was the wettest 24 hours on record in the city between Friday evening and Saturday evening. More rain was expected overnight. The city's airport was closed after reporting 249 millimetres in 24 hours. Now, that caused all sorts of flooding of buildings, significant damage. Auckland emergency management officials are currently working to make sure there's fresh water supplies around the city. More than 5,000 homes are being assessed for flood damage. We just hope that it doesn't worsen.
Yes, indeed. Now, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily interview with Liz Ritchie, the CEO of the Regional Australia Institute.
Yes, all about what regional and rural Australia needs to continue on their development path. It's not something that we talk a lot about on Fear and Greed, so it's a really interesting chat with Liz.
And some of the stats I found just really quite staggering in terms of not just the number of people that live in regional Australia, but also the contribution to Australia's economy. So it is a really significant topic to be discussing. And also coming up next as well is the week ahead with our resident economist, Stephen Koukoulas.
Yes, we talked about last week's inflation numbers and what that means for interest rates, which I think we're all just sort of building up to next Tuesday, Michael.
Yeah, they're both coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Monday, the 30th of January, 2023. Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.